Welcome back, focused learners, to today's explainer. If you've ever walked out of a lecture hall feeling like you absolutely nailed it, like you captured everything, only to look at your notebook a few days later and feel, well, totally lost, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're zeroing in on Lesson 57, Reconstructing a Lecture. Our goal here is to take those fragmented, rushed, shorthand notes you furiously scribbled during class and transform them into a polished, permanent academic summary. We're going to walk through the exact workflow you should be following the literal second your lecturer finishes speaking. Because let's be honest, we've all experienced this universal academic struggle. You're sitting there in the lecture, the professor is speaking at a mile a minute, and you're just frantically jotting down symbols, abbreviations, and half sentences. And in the moment, it all makes perfect sense. But let a few weeks pass, and suddenly you're staring at completely incomprehensible scribbles right before a massive exam. You look at an arrow pointing to a squiggly line and think, wait, what was I trying to say here? The harsh truth is raw notes have an incredibly short shelf life.
Okay, so let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, the note-taking aftermath, then expanding your shorthand. Next, the 3 C's of evaluation, followed by crafting a coherent summary, and finally, applying your reconstructed notes.
Kicking things off with Section 1, the note-taking aftermath. What actually happens when the lecturer stops speaking?
To really get this working, we need to completely shift our paradigm about what taking notes actually means. See, most students think that note-taking ends the exact second the lecturer stops speaking. But I want you to think of your raw notes as just a temporary bridge. When you're sitting in a lecture, you're navigating so much at once. The visual PowerPoint slides, the spoken words, maybe a handout. Because of this massive cognitive load, your notes are really just a rough first draft. If you actually want to retain this information for essays and exams, immediate post-lecture action is absolutely crucial. Basically, note-taking is only phase 1. Phase 2, that's reconstruction.
Which brings us to Section 2, expanding your shorthand. We're moving from fragments to full sentences.
This brilliantly illustrates the exact transformation we're aiming for here. On one side, we've got that raw shorthand. Maybe you jotted down a $sign or wrote etc. or used a quick arrow to represent the phrase led to. Or maybe you just scribbled approx for approximately or a C for century. But on the other side, we see the expanded notes. This is the magic step where you physically take those fragments and stretch them back out into complete, coherent thoughts. You take that arrow and explicitly write out, this resulted in, or which led to. Our source material actually refers to this step as reprocessing content for accuracy. When you're live in the lecture hall, you're totally advised to drop those small grammatical words, stuff like the, is, and are, and just focus on noun phrases and verbs. But when you're reconstructing, you have got to add that omitted grammar back in. Why? Because expanding these notes into full sentences is absolutely essential for preventing the loss of vital contextualizing information. Without it, you might remember the key terms, but you'll completely forget how they actually relate to one another. Moving into Section 3, the 3 C's of evaluation. This is all about grading your own notes. Now, what's really interesting about this is how our source material's independent study guidelines explicitly instruct students to evaluate their notes immediately after a lecture. And they use a framework called the 3 C's. This isn't just some random study tip. It's a fundamental academic skill designed to ensure you actually captured the lecture's core message. So the crucial point is actively applying these 3 C's to your own work. First up, clarity. Take a look at your notebook or document. Is it legible? Can you easily read what you just wrote? Second, comprehensibility. Read that newly expanded language back to yourself. Does it actually make logical sense? Or is it just a grammatically correct string of jargon? And third, completeness. Are there any glaring gaps? Like, did the lecturer mention 3 causes for something, but you only wrote down 2? You have to actively check for these gaps and fill them in while the lecture is still fresh in your mind. Because if you wait a week to check for completeness, that missing third point is gone forever.
Next up, Section 4, crafting a coherent summary, the final synthesis.
Let's make sure we clearly define what we mean by a summary, based strictly on our academic sources. Essentially, a summary is incorporating a large amount of information concisely into a small number of words. It is always shorter than the original text or lecture. It uses different language, meaning you aren't just copy-pasting what the lecturer said word for word, and it contains only the main points. You are literally taking a dense 60-minute lecture and distilling it down to its absolute essence. But to do this correctly, there are some pretty strict rules you need to follow. First, you absolutely must include the main points. the critical technical terms, and any specific definitions the lecturer provided. At the same time, though, you must actively exclude the hypergranular details, those random side examples, and any long contextualizing stories the lecturer used just to warm up the room. Next, you have to use your own words. Think synonyms and rephrasing. And finally, and this is a huge one, do not add your own opinions, your own reactions, or outside knowledge. A summary is simply a mirror, reflecting the lecturer's core argument and nothing more.
Let's bring this all together and see how this builds into the complete reconstruction workflow. Step 1, review your notes immediately after the lecture wraps. Step 2, expand those fragmented abbreviations and get your grammar back in there. Step 3, grade yourself. Check for gaps using the 3 C's, which are clarity, comprehensibility, and completeness. And finally, step 4, write that final, concise summary using your own words, focusing only on the main takeaways.
Finally, Section 5, applying your reconstructed notes. Let's talk about why this actually matters.
Taking the time to reconstruct your notes creates a permanent, highly reliable record. Think about it. When it comes time to revise for your final exams, or when you sit down to write a massive research essay, you won't be desperately flipping through pages of confusing, half-finished thoughts. You'll have a clear, concise, accurate summary of every single lecture. It locks in your long-term memory, prevents the utter panic of having to relearn forgotten material, and makes writing future assignments vastly easier and, quite frankly, a lot faster. So, I want to leave you with a quick challenge. Your next lecture is probably tomorrow or, hey, maybe even later today. When that lecturer finishes speaking and everyone else slams their laptops shut to rush out the door, take just 10 minutes. Stay in your seat, look at your shorthand, apply the 3 C's, and write a quick summary. Are you ready to actively reconstruct your learning? Try it out and just watch how it completely transforms your academic workflow. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and happy studying.